Hello, welcome back. So I did not finish removing the staples, but I'm going to finish those before the next break, before we put the fabric on the bottom of it. But we did get to the point where we can move on to the next step. So my name is Kim. My company name is Loco. I teach upholstery and furniture restoration, and I also offer those services, and I also fabricate my own projects, so you can purchase furniture from me over on my website too. I teach my classes 4 days a week, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. I host annual upholstery summer camps, potentially another one in the spring. I've done 4 camps so far, or I'm on my 4th camp, and they're really great. I really love them. Tuesdays is when I go live to do tutorials on what it is that I do, so I can draw you in, convince you this is something that you want to do with your time to make really cool stuff, potentially make money from it, but a lot of people that I work with are just in it for the experience. So that's what we're here to do today. At the last live, when we were there this morning from 11:30 to 12:30, we removed the staples from this. We didn't remove all the staples. We will before we finish it, but I didn't get those done in time in the break. But we do want to remove all of these so that this will set flat on this surface. Any bulkiness at all is going to make it so that it doesn't set flat, and that's not going to look clean. So we also removed the caning from the back of this chair, and we're going to replace that with fabric and foam and batting. And we're going to be putting foam and batting on the seat for this at this next stage. That's what we're doing today. So I want to briefly go over all of those steps with you. I'm in desperate need of a dry erase board. I'm using my toolbox right now. Let me flip this around. Okay. So here we're at part 2 of reupholstering this dining room chair. We already finished doing all of the stripping on it. We took the seat off. All the materials are removed. It's ready for new material. So that's what we're going to be working on during this next hour. We're going to be here from 1 till 2. We're going to break at 2 for a half hour, and then I'll be back from 2:30 to 3:30 to finish the job. I'm trying to make these tutorials a little bit faster for you and a little bit more condensed, so you don't have to spend 5 hours on here live with me. But we're going to be here for the next hour doing this itemized list. I highly suggest, before you get a project started, that you get everything lined up before you get going, because that's going to help you to be able to perform that job faster. The faster you go, the more time you save, the more money you're going to make in the long run. So that's what I'm here to teach you how to do today too. Not just the upholstery part, but how to save the impact on your body, how to save your time, how to save your money, how to make more money doing it. We're going to go through all of that as we go. So we're going to first go over the different tools and materials that we're going to use in the next step. And then I'm going to show you how to measure for those materials. A lot of people who come to my classes, first class is spent stripping the staples off. 3 hours of stripping the staples and probably more hours at home. If you can strip your staples before you come to class, you're going to get a lot more out of your class time. But a lot of people don't know where to start or where to stop, and I'm happy to help them with that and how to find the proper tools. So I'm going to show you how to measure for your materials after your first class of pulling the staples, so that you know where to go. When you go to your fabric store, you know how much material to pick up. So that's what we're going to do after that. Then we're going to cut the foam, and we're going to cut the batting, and then we're going to put it all on at the same time. I like to get all of my materials ready for the next stages instead of doing one and then doing another and then doing another. I have 6 chairs though. We're only going to be working on one today, so I'm not going to cut everything for everything today. But I am going to cut all of the foam and batting before we apply it, so we have that all done. So I am going to go over with you the list of tools that you're going to need to do this job, and I'm going to move you guys over to the table for that. Okay, this table is where I have my tools. So we know we're going to need a stapler to attach some of the materials to the chair. So I have that out of the way. You don't have to have a pneumatic stapler. You can use a manual stapler. You can use an electric stapler. A pneumatic stapler is going to be the fastest, easiest, most effective tool for you to use, and it's going to take the least impact out of your body. An electric stapler would be second to that, but an electric stapler you can't adjust the pressure, so when you change different hardnesses of woods, you might struggle with that. They also don't have a long nose or a nose on them at all like this does, which you're going to need to be able to access some areas of your project. If you're investing in a pneumatic stapler, I suggest you invest in a long nose first. You can use a long nose for everything, but you cannot use a short nose for some things, and you're going to need a long nose. And if you don't have one, you're going to be stuck, and you're not going to be able to move forward. So if you do invest in a stapler, invest in a long nose first. This is a short nose. We're going to need a Sharpie to mark our materials. We're going to be marking our foam and batting with that. Serrated knives to cut our foam. I usually use an electric bread knife, but I forgot to bring one home, so we're going to show you how to do that old school. And then I'm going to need a spray adhesive to attach my material to the substrate. I need a T-square or really long steel ruler to mark my materials, and then we're going to be using batting. I also have some cotton batting, but that's still put away underneath, but we'll get that out later. So these are all the materials that we're going to use to start attaching this down. So let's break this down into the different steps. Let me turn this around. Okay, so we're going to end with this because we need to get this cushion taken care of first so that we can move on to other steps. Before I even cut foam and batting and everything for this cushion, I need to mark for the pattern, because when I make my cushion cover, which we're making a box cushion, I need that pattern to fit the frame, not necessarily the foam with the batting on it, because that can be slightly larger. I want that fabric to pull snug around everything. So I am using the substrate to create my box top pattern. So before we do anything else, I want to get that marked down so that I can make sure that I don't forget to make that part of the pattern before we start putting foam and batting and everything else on there. So that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to move the chair out of the way. This is the fabric that we're going to be working with. This is like a corduroy velvet fabric. I thought about using this on the last set of chairs that we did, but I decided to use the blue. It is a velvet, so it has a direction. So typically when you take fabric off of a 54-inch bolt of fabric, it runs top to bottom, and the salvage edges are on the left to right. This is no exception to that rule. Sometimes the fabric can be run the length of the bolt, and when that is the case, these would be this way. The stripes would be in the other direction, and you would be able to stretch that across like a couch, for instance, because you can't, like a 54-inch bolt won't go the span of a couch. You have to put a seam in it. So if you wanted fabric to go the length of the couch, you want to look for a fabric that can be railroaded, which means it can be taken the length of the bolt. But this is top to bottom with salvage edge to left and right. So this is a velvet. It has a nap, which means it can be brushed down or it can be brushed up to made rough. This is the down direction, and this is up. When you're putting velvet material on your project, you want it to be brushed down when someone sits on it, because if it brushes backwards when someone sits on it, it's going to rustle up that nap and it's going to damage the material. So we want this to wipe down. It's also important to note that you want all of the fabric to be going in the same direction when you put it on your project. So let me grab another piece so I can show you where I am. If I were to put these two pieces of fabric together going opposite directions, they're going to appear to be two different colors, as you can see. So this is wiping down the nap, or wiping up the nap, and this is wiping down the nap. But if I were to turn it to be in the same direction, those two pieces of fabric now look to be the same color. So you want to be careful as you apply this. And now every time you look at a piece of furniture ad that is velvet, you're immediately going to see where they messed up. So keep this in mind because you want that to go on your project in the right direction. So this now wipes down. This means this is the back of my chair and this is the front of my chair, because when I sit on my chair, I scooch out to get out of it. So I need it to wipe that fabric down so it doesn't get damaged. And I want to be flipped this way. This piece I already cut because I was going to use it in a different seat, but I didn't end up doing that. I want to mark the back of my seat and the front of my seat. And I've also notched these corners right here. What I did was I folded this in half. Like this, and notched out the corner so that I would have a clear indication of where the center is. And I also can see where that lines up on the pattern so that I can make that the same point on all of my chairs so that they all look consistent. So now I have the center marked. I also want to mark the center across this so that I can line up my marks. And to do that, I'm going to measure the length of this. 14 and a half, 7 1/4, and then I'm going to do the same over here, 20 and a half, 10 and a 1/4. And now I can mark, I can connect those dots because that is where the center of my substrate is. So now I want to take these lines and line them up with the very center point of those notches that I already made so that that line lines up. And I also want to make sure that that actually follows suit. So this center line stays lined up with this line here and here. Okay. So now I just have to arrange this so that those two center lines line up. And you might want to get on top of it so you can see in the back. I'm a short person, so I can't see that. And this has got to be, I have to trace this pattern so that I can make the box top of my cushion, but it has to allow for me to be able to sew it, and which means I need to add extra material on it so I can run it through the sewing machine and sew it. And that term is called a seam allowance. So my standard seam allowance on my cushion covers is a 1/2 inch. That's what I sew pretty much everything at, unless it's leather or vinyl and I need to conserve material. So I need to add a 1/2 inch distance away from this cover. And if I had my seam puck, I would do that, but I don't have a seam puck. But these staples are a 1/2 inch, the crown is a 1/2 inch wide. So sometimes when I'm in a pinch, I will use these staples to connect the dots and do 1/2 inch dots, like every inch or so, all around this. Now I'm just getting this pattern cut out before we cut the rest of our materials. And not even cut out, just marked. I don't have to cut it yet because I need it to fit this substrate before I put my foam on it, because I want everything to fit this snug, not the foam. The foam is always made a little bit larger so that it can not roll over the edge but protects the sharp edge, and then the batting gets applied to it, but the batting, we don't account for that because we want the batting to fill it out. If you don't put batting between foam and fabric, it looks very flat. So we put the batting on there to provide a layer of air in between the foam and fabric. So before I put foam and batting on here and compromise the exact shape of my seat, I'm going to trace this pattern and set it aside, and we're going to use it in the next hour to make our box cushion. But for now, we just need it marked. And most people would say it is not wise to use a Sharpie, and I would have to agree. If you do use a Sharpie, use it on the back of your fabric. For me, it's easier for you guys to see the marks if I use a dark Sharpie, and I'm a glutton for punishment. But you can ruin fabric by doing that. Use whatever resource is easiest and most comfortable for you, but keep in mind you can waste a lot of money in the process if you don't do it right. If you guys are here and you're learning anything from me at all I ask is that you tap on the screen to like the content. When you're tapping on the screen, it sends my content out through the For You page, and that's how people find me, and that's how they learn what I do. That's how clients find me, and that is how students find me. So it is extremely valuable to me when you guys are there tapping on the screen in the comments. And if you have questions about anything that I'm doing, please put them in the comment section. I look back from time to time, and I go back through and I answer them. So I'm almost done with this. I'm hesitant to turn it now that it's on the fabric, because if it shifts in any way, it can make it not an exact pattern, and if it's not an exact pattern, it could look really weird when I go to upholster it. So even though I can't reach well across this table, I have to try my best to see. You just have to make sure that these staples are pushed into the side. And I'm just using tiny dots. I don't need to mark the whole thing because I can see to cut it, but you might want to connect these dots before you finish up and cut it if you're not that comfortable with your scissor to dot line connecting. Okay, so that's done. I can set this aside now. We're going to use this pattern later on down the road, but we need it the size of the substrate now. So I'm going to set this aside. Now I have an extra tabletop here today. Hooray! Look at my Sharpie. Camera around so I can see you see me. Okay, so the next step is cutting the foam for the substrate. And this is a unique shape. If it were a polygon, like straight lines, or rectangle, or square, I would plot those measurements and then cut it. But because this is a unique shape, I want to keep to the shape. I have this big old Sharpie. I like using the big ones for tracing these because they add a little bit of depth to that measurement, which is about 1/4 inch. When you go to cut the foam for this substrate, you want the foam to be slightly bigger than the edge of all of the substrate. You want it to like roll kind of over the edge, but you don't want it to roll over the edge. It'll round out the front too much, and if it gets underneath, it's going to clog up the system. But you do want it to sort of like roll over this sharp edge right here. So I use a big thick Sharpie to trace these, and I put it out into the foam so that I can trace all the sides. And I run it with the side of the marker touching the substrate. So I'm not putting the marker tight in on the crease. I am marking it so that it's standing straight up at a 90-degree angle and the side of the marker is touching the substrate. And I'm just going to trace that all the way around. And I'm just going to trace that all the way around. And I'm just going to trace that all the way around. 2 inches long. When you order upholstery materials from my website, to rough cut. So typically for this part of the process, I will use an electric bread knife or a bandsaw to cut this out. The length of this material is too long for a bandsaw, so I can't fit it through there. I could always rough cut it with an electric bread knife, but I don't have an electric bread knife. All I have on me is a serrated knife. Now a serrated bread knife is going to be the best tool, but any serrated knife will work. You want one with a long blade so that you can get through the thickness of your foam, but if this is all you have, this is something you can use. What I will say is that the blades on these only cut in one direction. So if you take this knife to your foam material and you start sawing it, like a little piece of wood, and I'll say this is also true for wood, it's going to chop it up and it's going to look real choppy. This particular knife only cuts when you push, so when you go to cut your material, and I'm rough cutting it, which means I'm coming out just a little bit further than I need to so that I don't get too close to the edge. I'm just going to start on this end and I'm just going to push it through my foam. Maybe it's pull. This one is pull. So I'm going to pull and it's going to start to cut through my foam. Now it's not a perfect flat cut. You'll be able to get a perfect flat cut with a saw, but it does work pretty well. This is push. Push works better. So I'm rough cutting it. I'm not super concerned about what it looks like, but I do want to make sure that I'm not wasting too much material. I have another piece of foam to put next to this. So I want to keep it kind of close, but if my blade tips in any way, that's going to bevel that foam in any one direction, and it could ruin my cut. So I do want to make sure that I am a little distance away because I can't manage my cut while this is attached to an 82-inch piece of foam. It's just too much fun. And I'm sure silicone spray will actually help as well. I don't have any of that here. So the next step is to cut the rest of this foam free. I'm going to rough cut again on this side so that I can control this a little bit easier. And you can save this foam for other projects. This is too small as a 2-inch piece of foam for most things. But one day I would like to chop them all up into little pieces and turn them into like a bedding that I can make dog beds with. Because I think that people think that we save a lot of furniture from the landfill, but 90% of what we take off gets thrown into the trash. We keep the biodegradable part. And there still isn't a great solution for sustainable materials in this industry. This foam, though, does turn to dust. It does biodegrade over time. It does take a while. But usually it's in furniture when it does that. And usually when it gets replaced, it is because it is turned to dust and it is gross. So I have not had to do this in a very long time with a manual tool. So I'm going to do my best. And my guess is that it's not going to look super great, but we always have batting going on afterwards that is also going to improve the smoothness of it if it goes too south. Let me get you in place. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to use that pushing motion to get through this. I'm pulling towards myself in this direction because I feel like I can control it better. I may change my mind as I move through this, but I'm going to be pushing, and what I want to be mindful of is keeping my knife straight up and down at a 90-degree angle. If I tip it to either side, it's going to bevel this cut, and it's going to make it a different shape than I need it to for my seat. So I'm going to start back here, and I'm going very slow because it's more important for me to be accurate at this stage than it is for me to be fast. If I get it wrong, I've got to do it over again. So I'm trusting the process, and I'm just pushing, pulling it back out, moving closer, and pushing, and then you'll notice that it is creating this nice clean line, much cleaner than this, as I cut through, because I'm taking my time and I'm going slow. And I'm just tracing the line that's there. I am holding the foam here. I have it sticking off the side of my table a little bit. I'm bracing it here, and I'm holding this in place so that it doesn't flop around and move when I cut, because it helps to stabilize it. I don't want this to move up and down because I might end up cutting it crooked. And so I'm not sawing it. I'm just pushing down, and then bringing it back up, and then pushing down, bringing it back up. I'm letting the weight of the knife sort of just fall to cut that line. And you can see we still have some weightiness, but it's still at a 90-degree angle, straight up and down. The weightiness will be resolved when we put the batting in. So now that everything is more stable, I can start pulling this back, and that is going to help increase the rate at which I can cut it, because it's pulling it away from the knife at the same time. And it's making it easier for me to see. I'm very careful not to tip my blade. I need it to stand straight up and down. This is not the time to start going fast, because we're doing so great. We've come so far. We just need to take it slow so that we don't have to do it more than once. Foam is expensive when you buy it brand new. Jo-Ann Fabrics does have high density foam you can use, but it's not the same kind of high density foam as professional upholstery foam. So if you're looking for professional materials, I give you a great deal, a bit of my wholesale discount on my website, so you can order all different thicknesses of foam, batting, decorative nail heads, threads, tools, everything you can think of. So I'm just going to take this right off the edge. So that I can work this one side at a time. So I'm just easing it back out, not cutting, and then dropping it down while pushing into the foam, keeping my blade at a 90-degree angle. And this is why bread knives are great, because they have that long blade to work with. Where's the steak knife? If you don't have a bread knife, a steak knife will work too. And it will be just as clean, but if the blade isn't long enough, it's going to be more difficult to get through your foam. But for the purposes of this 2-inch foam, this works great. For 1-inch foam, I use scissors. This knife is way more effective than the steak knife. And you can get these at thrift stores. So you don't have to spend a lot of money on these tools when you're just getting started. You can earn the money and then spend that on the good stuff. But I will say, invest in a good staple remover day one, because that's going to make or break you. If you hate removing staples, you're going to want to make that go as fast and efficiently as possible. So now I'm picking up the speed because I'm getting cocky and confident, but it still looks good. Around that corner. See on this side. Let me see. If I got any questions? Are the staples to mark the seam allowance? Yes, that's what I was using for that. Because they're a 1/2-inch crown, so if I had a bobbin on me, I would use a bobbin. But I did not. Not out here. I like to use a seam puck. My friend Jeremy Beals of Beals Upholstery invented a really useful tool for marking your seam allowance, particularly on like crazy shapes like this, which is essentially the same idea as using a bobbin, because the hole in a bobbin is exactly a 1/2 inch away from the edge, so you can put a pen in it and then roll the bobbin along the edge and it'll trace your seam allowance. That's how the seam puck works. I just don't have it on me. So Jeremy, if you're watching, I need one for my home studio, because I have to leave the other one in the classroom. If you guys are new here, I do this every Tuesday. I teach you different tutorials on different projects that I'm working on. And you can ask questions along the way, but I also teach virtual upholstery workshops. My regular workshops can be attended in person or virtually every day. And I have classes Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. So you can join me at any of those times and I can walk you through your project and you can get your questions answered in real time. Now we got this side. This is going way better than I anticipated. I was prepared to tell you guys, don't worry about it looking super perfect, but this is easier than I remember, and that's just probably come with experience. Of course it is. Now, if I had my bandsaw here, I would be, after I rough cut this, I would just run it through the bandsaw, because that is like the easiest tool. This is getting a little far away from my line. These knives won't last forever, but luckily they're super cheap. I think this is just a Walmart brand knife. And I've had it for years. And I use it for food and foam. That's it. That's the whole cushion. We did it. So these edges, they're a little wavy, but that's nothing you're going to see when you put the batting on. So let's see how that fits on our substrate, shall we? Perfect, perfect, perfect. Just a little slight bit of an overlay, and that's all we need to protect that foam. We don't want to see the wood substrate either when we put everything on. And the fabric will have a little bit of give to it, so it's going to fit this nice and snug. So the next step is to do batting. Let me pull this up here. Let's see if you guys got any questions. I'm melting. It might be turning into Rudy Giuliani. Oh. It is probably like 80 degrees here in Michigan right now, and I do not have air conditioning in this garage. So, let's see. What do we got here? Have you tried compressing the foam and cutting it with a sharp knife? I have not. I don't have anything that will compress the foam all down evenly at once. I don't have a tool that will do that yet. But that's interesting for sure. Ooh, Ricky TV is here. Hey Ricky, how's it going? I'm just going back through. Make sure I get all the questions. And what time do we got? 1:37, so we still have plenty of time before batting. So now we need to measure for that. This, let me see if I can find another chair here. So this is what the chair looked like before. This has very sharp edges at the top. Sometimes, if it's made with a box cushion, it's going to create nice clean edges. If it's made as a wrap and staple, it's going to round all those edges out. We want to keep those edges clean, so we're going to make a box cushion just like this one to put on this foot. So we're able to do that. We have a foam shape, that's enough. We have to add batting to it, but we have to add batting to it in a way that's not going to round out that shape because we want to keep a nice sharp shape. So we're going to cut a panel of batting for the top of this, and then we're going to cut strips of batting to go on the sides. I'm going to use glue to attach it, and none of that material is going to wrap underneath this foam. The only thing I want to wrap underneath here is the fabric, because I need this to sit flat on the base when I'm done, and the more material you wrap under there, the lumpier it's going to get. And I'll also say it's going to keep this edge nice and clean also, so we're going to put our welts on there, it'll look nice and sharp. So the goal is to get a nice sharp look like this. So what we have to do first is we have to measure the top of this so we can get that cut out, and then we're going to glue the top of that to this. Then we're going to trim all the way to the edge of the foam. Then we're going to measure the strips to go on the sides, and we're going to glue those to the sides. Then we'll be probably taking a break, and when we come back at 2:30 p.m., we're going to cut all of our pattern pieces out of our fabric, sew them together, and then we're going to put everything on the chair. So that's what's next. So let me flip this around. So the first thing I want to do is measure my seat for the material that I need to put on. So that is going to be measured at the widest width to the longest length. And on this seat, the widest width is right up here in the front because it's narrower at the back. And the longest length starts up here at the front and goes to the back. In the middle, because there's a hump that comes out here in the middle. So I'm going to measure that, and I'm going to add 1 inch to each length and width to make it so it's just a little bit longer than the sides so that I can trim it to fit it perfectly. So my width is 21 inches, we're going to go 22, and my length is 17 inches, we're going to go 18. So 22 by 18 inches. Let me roll out the back. If I were doing all of my chairs at once, I would have cut all my foam at once, and then I cut all my batting at once, and then I cut all my fabric at once, and then I'd piece all those together in the steps it keeps you doing. Now this batting is 54 inches wide, and I have quite a bit of it here on the roll. I already don't remember the measurement. You should write it down. 22 by 18. So that's what this T-square is going to be really good at. Now I can tell by looking at this that this material was not cut square, so I want to make it square before I go too much further so that my measurements will be more precise. And I just use that to line this flat edge here up with the straight edge of the factory edge of this. So if this is 54 inches, I can get 22-inch widths. I can get 2 of those on here. So I'm going to go ahead and cut for 2 of them right now. And then the length of those is going to be 18 inches. So I want to line my T-square up with the line here, measure down here at 18 inches at one spot, and then I'm going to come up here a little bit further, use the T-square to keep it on that line, mark it at 18 inches here, and then my edges edges should align with the T-square there if everything is square, and these lines should line up at the same exact spot, which they do. So first I'm going to cut this out using some sharp scissors. Sharp scissors. I'm going to clean this edge up. And then all I need to do, because I know I can only get 2 of those out of here, is fold it in half. And I do like to save this extra material. I rip it apart and I make polyfill with it. You waste a lot of polyfill when you're doing upholstery and cotton batting. So I like to try to conserve it so I can use it for projects later on my work. Now this will be a little wider than you need it, but I won't be able to do anything with the excess that comes off of it, so I'm just going to trim it. So the next part, this is for the top. The next part that I want to measure for is the thickness of the batting that's going to go along the sides. So I'm just going to measure the height of that, and I'm going to add an inch. That's 2.5 inches. I'm going to do 3.5 inches. And I'll probably have to cut 2 strips of this to make it all the way around. If this is more than 54 inches wide, which it is, it's more than 60. So I'm going to need to cut 2 strips of that off of my batting. 2 3.5 inch strips. So I'm just going to manipulate the material so that it's in an easy place for me to access with my body to make it faster to go through the process. And then again, using my T-square to make a couple of strategic marks. Now I won't be able to use the T-square part because I can't get my ruler back there all the way, but I can still. So 2 3.5 inch segments is 7 inches. So I'm lining my 7 inch mark here, making one at 3.5 inches and making one on top. I'm going to come to the middle and I'm going to do the same mark, 3.5 and at the top. And then 1 again on this end. And now I can use these dots to connect the dots. To make my lines go all the way down. Always plot your measurements and cut them. Don't ever, especially if you're sewing something, don't ever rely on these measurements to eyeball them, because if you're doing a project, particularly if you're sewing it, all of the measurements have to be precise in order for it to fit well. So if you notice that you're not getting a good fit with your projects, it might be because your pattern isn't exactly right. So best practices are to plot and then cut. Now the next step is going to be to glue everything to the substrate, and then we're going to take a break and we're going to come back at 2:30 to sew the pattern together, cut all the fabric patterns, sew them together, and then attach everything to the seat, and we will stick around until that job is complete. So you will get to watch the whole process from start to finish today. I'm trying to break down these lives into more consumable chunks, like shorter chunks, and then it makes it easier for me to edit them so I can put them on YouTube in a more effective way, and it makes it easier for you guys to watch them. If you have questions, leave them in the comments. I'm happy to answer them. Check to make sure we got it with it. This is what we need to finish these last steps here today. And this is, we got our foam, we got our substrate, we have our batting that goes on the top, and our batting that goes on the side. And then we're going to use this contact adhesive to apply everything. We're not using any staples yet. You don't have to use staples at this stage. If you were wrapping and stapling your fabric onto the foam, you might wrap and staple your batting too to help round out those edges. But we want to keep a nice crispy edges, sharp edges, so we're gluing everything to it instead of putting too many staples in. So this is the contact adhesive that I like to use. This is intended for fusing two pieces of foam together. This I carry on my website, so you can purchase that from me. It'll ship right to your door. This is super duper strong. Now they do have contact adhesive at Lowe's that you can use that will work just as well for this purpose, but it is not strong enough to fuse two pieces of foam together. So I wouldn't use it for that. But this will work fine for us. It might be an overkill for what we're doing, to attach the foam first to the substrate. Then we're going to put the batting on the top, and then we're going to put this batting sides along the sides. And everything is going to get glued that way. So contact adhesive means it only sticks to itself. So I have to spray the bottom of the foam, and I have to spray the surface of the substrate in order for them to stick together. Same thing when I do the batting to the top. So that's what we're going to do now. I like to lay the substrate on the foam because then I can see it really well and make sure that it's being placed properly. What I will say is that once you place the glue to glue surface, it will be stuck there forever. So do make sure that it is in the right spot. So this is the top of the seat. I know because I still have staples I have to remove at the next break for the bottom. So I'm going to I don't need to cover the whole thing. I don't need to super saturate it. I just need some solid coverage in the center here. Previously it was glued and there's only a little bit of glue right here. I'm going to go a little further than that. And I'm going to put it close to the edges but not all the way. This comes out like Spider-Man's webs, so it's pretty easy to see, which means it's easy to control, which means you shouldn't get too much overspray. You don't need to go all the way to the edges. If you go all the way to the edges, you're going to get overspray. Next step is to glue the foam. It's a little bit harder to see on the foam, but I just get a nice solid coat on both of those. And then this needs to dry for just a couple of minutes to get tacky before sticking together. And sometimes I like to do this so that the air will help dry them and make them tacky faster. And then when I stick them together, I do so by placing the wood on top of the foam so that I can see it. I just want to make sure I'm in the right spot for this. So I'm going to very carefully use my pinkies and my remaining fingers to elevate this in the air so it doesn't drop down too fast. And then I'm going to look at all my edges to make sure that I'm getting a similar overlap around all of my edges. So everything goes on consistently. Looks looking good to me. And now I can push it down. And now that is permanently fused. I can pick up the whole seat by the foam because it is permanently fused down. So if you wait, like if you mess up, you have to kind of take it off as fast as you can, but as carefully as you can, because it will just stick the foam to there and it'll rip the foam and keep that part with it, and it'll make big holy chunks of the foam. So now that I have that part done, the next part is to glue the batting to the top so I can trim that over. Same process, just a little bit of glue, and I don't want to put my glue very close to the edge here because I don't want to get it on my scissors. I want to keep that in mind for the batting too. I just need the batting to hold still while I trim everything around. I want it to not twist and move so that it doesn't end up being too small. So I just am going to do the center of this, flap it around a minute, And you can do foam on top of this, or you can do this on top of foam, whatever is easiest. But you want to make sure it's sticking off at all edges. I'm going to leave a bigger chunk sticking off of one side so that can be used more likely. And then I'm just going to lay it flat down. Now this is also permanently stuck to the seat. So I want to remove all the excess material here so that I can keep the nice sharp shape of my seat. So I'm going to cut that with a pair of scissors. And I'm using a pretty crappy pair of scissors for that because the glue can ruin your scissors for sure. And when I do that, I'm just going to run my scissors along the edge so that this cuts right with the edge perfectly. I want it to be the exact shape and size as the front. And I'm stopping to pull this back so I can see what I'm doing. Not just blindly trusting that I know where I'm going, but making sure that that stays nice and flush with that edge. Now when I go to put the sides on here, those are actually going to come up to the top of this here. So we're going to go around all four sides. Sharp scissors would work better, but they'll also get ruined. Last side. Now I will get through to asking the questions before we end here today. So if you have questions about what I'm doing or even about your own project, tools, or anything, go ahead and put them in the comments. And before we wrap up here at 1:30, which I don't know what time it is, it could be close to that already. Oh, we're almost at 2. Oh yeah, 1 to 2. Before we wrap up here at 2 p.m., I'll go back through and I'll answer these. Next step is to glue these box sides on. And I want them to butt up against each other in a place where they won't be noticed, if they're noticed at all. So it looks like one of them will fit all the way around this edge, so that's what I'm going to start with. And I'm just going to spray glue this a little bit at a time so I don't waste too much glue. But I'm going to spray my edge, this whole side part. I'll probably spray all the edges so that it'll dry in time. And that's what this glue is a little bit of an overkill for, because this is super strong glue. But like spray adhesive you get at Joann's or Lowe's or Hobby Shop will work just fine for this purpose. So now I'm just going to spray a little bit of my batting at a time so it doesn't stick to anything, including my fingers. Make it a little part of that edge. What I want it to do is stay flush with the top of this seat. That's the goal. It can come down longer at the bottom because I can trim it. I can trim it from the top too. But I want it to stay flush with the top edge of this. So, I'm going just a little bit at a time, pulling it a little bit taut so it doesn't sit loose. You don't want to bag up. You want it to be nice and tight. And then both of these ends come out a little bit far from the ends, so I can cut those off. This is a really great place to butt them up against each other because you won't see the seam if you don't get it lined up right, because it's going to be just one piece that covers the edge. So I'm going to pre-cut this a little long. I'm going to cut the excess off of this far edge. And that's it. We finished putting foam and batting on the seat cover. We'll do the foam and batting on the chair in the next hour, and the seat back as we put the fabric on there, because the fabric has to go on first. Let me flip this around so I can talk to you guys. Oop, I had it. There we go. All right. While you guys are here, while I'm yapping, if you could just be tapping the screen as violently as possible, sending my stuff through the For You page. It's way more effective than sending me gifts because it draws people to my page. My name is Kim. I teach upholstery. Today we're working on reupholstering this mid-century chair. In the next hour, when we come back at 2:30, we will be working on cutting out the fabric padding, sewing it with an industrial sewing machine, and applying everything to the chair. So we will be wrapping the chair up in the next hour. We'll be back at 2:30, and we'll stick around until we finish it, even if it goes past 3:30. So that's what you have to expect. I teach upholstery workshops 4 days a week. You can attend those virtually over Zoom, or you can attend them in person. I teach out of my local makerspace, which is a really cool place. It's like having a gym membership, but for tools. And I teach those classes on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. So if you're not local and you want to travel to come take these classes, I make it easy for you to take a weekend block. Maybe you find a cheap hotel to stay out here. Maybe you go stay at the Newton, and Allison will make all of your meals for you. But you can take a 4-day class structure for just $225. Or you can come to my upholstery summer camp. Sorry, I'm getting warnings and stuff on my phone while I look at this. So there's a lot of different ways you can learn upholstery from me, but I do teach for free here on Tuesdays. We'll be back at 2:30 p.m. to go over making the patterns, sewing it together, and then putting everything back on the chair. So if you guys want to learn how to do the upholstery part, that's what we're going to be doing the next hour. But just this past hour, we cut the foam, we applied the batting, and we got everything ready for the chair to receive new fabric. So I'll be back here in a half hour. I appreciate you guys joining me here today. I'm going to go up and look and see if there's any questions. Let's see. I think we got them all. Is it $275 for all 4 days? It's $225 for all 4 days. For Friday, it's each class, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, is a 3-hour workshop. So it's 12 hours total, $225, because my classes are $75 each, but they're buy 3 get 1 free. So you can buy 4 of them, and they don't have to be all 4 next to each other. They can be however you want. I have my schedule up through November right now. But if you buy 4, you get 1 free, so it makes the 4 days $225. And you're not likely to finish a project in one class, but if there's a specific skill you want to learn or work on in one class, then you can join one class and we can spend that 3 hours focusing on that skill. So I appreciate you guys joining me. We'll be back here in another hour. It's hot in here. I gotta charge my phone. Thanks so much for joining me. We'll see you soon.